Hello and welcome to this ISM Trust webinar on Send Barriers to Singing. I'm Jenny Trattles, Music Education Consultant, Musicianship Director at Voices Foundation and Associate Musical Director of Scunthorpe Cooperative Junior Choir. To describe myself, I'm a white woman with straight brown hair. I'm wearing a blue top and there is a Nordic woodland mural and a plant behind me. One of our panelists, Sarah Fisher, is unfortunately unwell and will not be joining us in today's webinar, so we wish her all the best for her journey to recovery. I am delighted, however, to be joined by the Director of the Applied Music Research Centre at the University of Roehampton, Adam Ockelford, and Trustee of the Yorkshire Association for Music and Special Educational Needs, Diane Paterson. Before we begin the webinar, just a few things to note. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer these at the end. And do keep an eye on the chat box where we will drop in some really useful links. If you experience any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat box and we'll attempt to resolve them. And if you wish to use them, subtitles are available to enable at the bottom of your screen. The webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording with you afterwards, as well as a feedback survey, which would be very grateful if you could fill out. The ISM Trust is the ISM sister charity, which offers high quality professional development to everyone working in music. Through the Trust, the ISM gives back to the sector and supports and empowers music professionals to succeed. The Trust produces award-winning events, training and resources which are largely completely free to access. Please consider supporting the work of the ISM Trust by becoming a friend, making a donation or leaving a legacy. Any support you can offer is really appreciated. Now, I'm very pleased to hand over to our panelists, who I will invite to introduce themselves. So let's start with you first, Adam.
Hello, everyone. It's Adam Ockelford here. I'm a white male in many literal ways because my hair is now completely white. And I'm in my office at home. And it's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll pass over to Diane.
Hello, it's good to be here. And my name's Diane Paterson, and I'm a white female. I've got grey hair, like Adam. Mine's shoulder length, and I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a green shirt with a mustard coloured scarf. And I'm in my dining room at home with a bookshelf behind me. Do you want any more information about what I do?
Absolutely, we want more information about what you do.
So for 26 years, I was a peripatetic teacher around Leeds, working for Art Forms, the Music Hub, teaching children, exclusively working with children with additional needs in the special schools and units in mainstream. Before that, I worked for the Drake Music Project, looking at music technology and working with people with physical disabilities. Before that, I was a secondary school music teacher. I'm now retired from those things, but actually, I don't think music teachers do retire. I'm still teaching some singing at a music centre, running a youth choir, and I'm very involved with the charity Yamson, which you mentioned earlier. And that charity I've been involved with all the time. I've had my job with the music service, and I don't think you do retire from this charity. I think you just go on forever. And it's a great charity providing activities for young people with additional needs, great big music days with lots of wonderful experiences, and it has choirs and singing opportunities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. And Adam, do you want to talk about your experience and why you're here?
Yes, I'm not sure why I'm here, but it's very nice to be here. I work at the University of Roehampton and I run a number of charities. One is the Amber Trust, which is for children with vision impairment. We support about 700 to 800 children and young people every year across the UK to have music lessons, to pay for instruments and travel and concert tickets. And I also run Sounds of Intent charity, which is really aims at supporting musical development across the spectrum of ability and need. And I'm secretary of SEMPRE, which is the Society for Education, Music and Psychology Research. We publish journals and books, and we support research across the world in the fields of music education and music psychology.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Adam. So before we really start the presentations, I just think that it's relevant to share with you that I am the proud mother of two neurodiverse boys. In fact, my eldest prefers to be termed as neurodivergent. They're both currently at two different mainstream secondary schools, as they have almost the opposite needs in terms of environment and adaptations. When I started my career as a teacher in a primary school almost 20 years ago, I will confess that my approach to working with SEND pupils and young people was based on that medical model approach, that less able to achieve, less able to fully take part. And when my eldest first received his diagnosis 9 years ago, it still very much felt like that sort of environment. Over the years, having been to many EHCP reviews and IEP meetings and such, I have really noticed a shift towards this social model of disability, where it's not the person that's disabled, it's the physical and attitudinal barriers of society which disables them. And when I speak to Senkos in schools, they've been flying this flag for years. But when you speak to extremely busy teachers, this message, I don't feel, quite has come through, and it is still very much that medical base, that less able, and the activity is often, the learning activity is often the most central part of when they are approaching activities. And maybe it needs to be that way for these teachers, especially in the UK, having a very heavy push on assessment, especially in secondary schools. But I really do feel that, especially in music, we've got a real opportunity to put that young person right at the centre. So with all of that in mind, what I'm hoping for this webinar is that it will allow us to identify these physical and attitudinal barriers to singing, which might exclude people. And by doing that, hopefully allow ways to discuss and make you at home think of your own ways of how we can create pathways through these barriers. So I'm going to hand over to Adam. Adam, would you share with us your expertise of what barriers and what solutions you have come across?
Sure, yes, thanks, Jenny. I've got a brief presentation which I'll start with, but maybe just again, speaking from personal experience, I started working in the field of vision impairment and music about 45 years ago now. And the biggest barrier that blind children faced was attitudinal. So mainly ignorance and actually the anxiety of teachers that they couldn't manage a child who couldn't see. And actually today, things have certainly improved hugely, but still the single biggest barrier to inclusion is still people's attitudes. Above all, not that they want to do the wrong thing. In fact, they want to do the right thing. But I think sometimes it's the pressure of being anxious about doing the right thing that prevents people from taking that step. And so a lot of what I've done in the last 10 years or so is to provide resources and training materials for teachers, policymakers, managers in music hubs, and parents indeed, to show just what children with special needs and special abilities can do. I think needs and abilities are different sides of the same coin, and it's really important that we think about abilities first and foremost. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully it'll all just work. I'm sure Jenny will shout if it's wrong. She's not shouting, so I assume it's right. Okay, so the sort of lens through which I'll talk is the sound of intent framework, and in particular how musical development underpins the development of singing skills. So sounds of intent, I'm not expecting, it's a very brief presentation, so don't try and read what's on the circles. There's the website for that, which you can go and find anytime, which is www.soundsofintent.app. But the important thing about Sounds of Intent is that it's a fully inclusive map, if you like, of how we all develop musically. And it identifies 3 different ways in which we engage with sound and music. There's the reactive, which is listening and responding, proactive, which is making music alone, and there's interactive, which is making music with other people. And there are 6 kind of milestones, if you like, on that journey of musical development. And where we are on the journey can vary from day to day. It can vary from context to context. So, for example, while I may regard myself as a mature musician in the Western classical tradition, I'm aware that, for example, Indian classical music, while I enjoy it a lot, I don't have the same knowledge. And so in that sense, you know, I have further to go on that journey. And I think it's absolutely right and proper that we should regard ourselves, everyone, each of us, every human being, as being part of the same musical universe. So briefly, I'd like to talk about 4 of those levels. And they are level 2, which I regard as sound makers, level 3, which we call pattern makers, level 4, which is motif makers, and level 5, which is music makers. So sound makers are at the sensory stage of development. They're still learning to appreciate sound and how that fits with other sensory input. Pattern makers about repetition, about imitation, about copying, about a sense of, if I can copy you, I might be a bit like you, the sort of very early musical interactions. Motif makers are about those clusters of sounds that make pieces of music what they are. So whenever we think of a piece of music, if I asked you now to think of your favorite piece of music, you'd probably think of a little motif, almost like a meme of 3 or 4 notes, maybe 5 notes, that would encapsulate that particular piece. And that's a distinct stage of musical development that children typically go through at about 2 or 3 years of age. Music makers is when we get a sense of tonality, if you like, a sense of a key framework which lasts throughout a piece, and a sense of groove or meter as well. So there's a common framework of pitch and of time that music is sort of based on. And so we look at those 4 levels and think about what they have, what they can tell us about the way the brain gets ready to be able to sing. And to show really how this works through early childhood, and then in the context of those who are on a slightly different musical path, I've just got 4 examples, first of all, of children in the early years. So here's a young baby who's at the sound making stage, at the sensory stage. Here he goes. And you can see and hear the sheer joy of actually exploring his vocal cords, and just the sensory pleasure that gives, and the feedback it gives as well. It's so important as we develop the different sounds that we make with our voices. Here's the next baby enjoying pattern making with her mum. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry, here we go.
Mama, 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 mama. Oh, baby. Mama, mama. Mama, mama. Papa, papa. Mama, mama. Mama, mama.
There we go. You can see how, as we know, copying, imitation is such a fundamental part of the way that we learn to relate to each other as human beings. And also it's that repetition, it's that copying that actually makes music what it is. Essentially, that's musical structure. The motif makers are at a nursery where I'm a governor. We can see the children are enjoying making siren sounds with cardboard tubes. Here we go. It's interesting, the children both recognize the bar-ball motif as something that means something. It's an emergency vehicle sound, but also as a plaything. They can copy each other. They can begin almost to construct a piece of music. And this next clip is quite well known. I can take no credit for it, but it's so delightful. I've got to play it. It just shows, here's this young boy sings. You'll see that development of a sense of key, of a sense of meter, of the sort of groove of a piece can actually develop very early on. I've certainly worked with children of about 18 to 24 months who can already sing songs in time and in tune. The human brain is so fantastic in absorbing information from the environment, particularly human information about language or music, and actually intuitively coming to terms with it. Here we go.
Don't worry about a thing. Everything's gonna be alright. I woke up this morning on my horizon. 3 little birds were on my doorstep, singing sweet songs. Melody pure and true. You sent this message to you.
Thank you. Might have been pointing to his daddy there. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? How much the human brain just absorbs very early on. And I guess a question for music educators is, there's a little preschool boy already able to perform. How do we build on that as music educators at school to really maximize that potential? So those are for typically developing young children, and to show the same musical journey, but in the context of children with special abilities and needs. I've got 4 different examples. So here's a very old video of my ex-colleague from the RNIB, Sally Zimmerman, working with a young man called Matthew. And you can hear how Matthew is also exploring his vocal cords in the context of communication, and how Sally imitates him in the hope that this will stimulate a sense of self and other, which I think it does very effectively. There you go. So there's Matthew exploring his vocal cords, learning how to control pitch and doing it in the context of communication. This next clip is a dear colleague, Pat, who's a music therapist and teacher, working with a girl called A. And you can see how Pat takes what her young pupil offers and constructs a piece of music around it, and how the girl appreciates that at some intuitive level and they have a dialogue between them. I do love computers when they have a mind of their own. Here we go. So you can see how within that very simple dialogue of a very simple pattern, a whole relationship is constructed, and how the beginnings of music that Pat so skillfully scaffolds are there. This next clip is of a girl called Amy, who's about 3 years old, and she's visually impaired. And she's using motifs, these fragments of nursery rhymes, to construct her own song that psychologists call a potpourri song. It's like they've got different scents from different places and made them into this rather nice whole. And in fact, it's really interesting, you know, that children create their own songs before they sing the complete songs that we teach them. It was a chap called Helmut Moog in the 1960s who first recognized the power of children's creative singing. I think, you know, before that, in the old days, people thought the songs that children sing are kind of imperfect models of what adults do. And Helmut Moog turned that on its head and said, no, what children do at this stage, this level 4, the motif makers, is actually a stage in its own right that we should celebrate. And children are actually composers before they are performers, if you like, because they create their own music from the fragments they hear in their environment before they learn to sing entire songs created by other people. Here's Amy.
So much reader of your mouse, pay your penny by, 'cause you go fast.
Children gain great pleasure, as Amy is doing, from singing both nursery rhymes and familiar tunes, with you and on their own.
Georgie run away, Mary pray, I just grow, so bombers on what you say. Kit, make
Get the feeling someone's told Amy she's clever before now, because she's anticipating the applause. And lastly, dear friend, Lisa Hermans, Lisa is blind and on the autism spectrum and has learning difficulties. And she was chosen to sing at the opening of the Paralympics. She sings a national anthem. But you can see how Lisa, the only barriers to Lisa's musical engagement are attitudinal, because her musical abilities are amazing and joyous, and she absolutely loves to perform. Here she goes. And there we go. So the important messages for me are, in order to understand singing, we need to understand how the musical brain develops. And you can see across the 8 examples that in both typically developing children and in children who exist across the spectrum of different abilities and needs, music is essentially it's the universal language. And really the barriers that children face to musical development are principally in us as teachers and supporters, in terms of having the right strategies and the right aspirations to share with our pupils, I think, as they develop. So after this seminar, you're very welcome to get in touch. There's the email address, and there is the web address for Sounds of Intent. So I shall stop sharing now. And I think hand over to Diane, is that right?
That's right. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adam. I enjoyed every moment of that. That was wonderful. So I think we'll just pass straight over to Diane, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, that's fine. You'll see I'm now wearing a woolly jumper because it's gone really cold here, and the temperature changing every 2 minutes. So I shall share my screen, and let's hope this works. Okay. From the beginning. Slideshow. From the beginning. There we go. Okay. So mine's more looking at things from being a teacher, sort of working with the children and seeing who can sing and how you can make it accessible for everyone who's there. First of all, just a brief note about our charity. I shall pass this PowerPoint on so that you can read this in your own time. I'm going to whiz through it. A network of musicians, teachers, carers, and volunteers. We realise the value of music for those with additional needs. And this was first sorted, this charity started in 1979 when a bunch of teachers in the new special schools that hadn't existed before the 70s spotted that their children were really able at music when they might not be able at other things. And they wanted to share opportunities. They threw out the gauntlet to the city of Leeds and said, "You want to come and discuss this?" So many people turned up, they couldn't get in the room. And that's really how it started. So this acknowledgement that it's not about how you do in reading and writing, it's what you can do in music that we want to know about. And we provide opportunities for these children. And now a lot of them have grown up. So we now have worked with them. Now they're adults. We provide choirs and things for them to do and run training. A lot of it stopped in lockdown, but we're getting it all back together again. So why would you want to include all these people in a choir? There are so many advantages to having people with disabilities or neurodiverse in your choir. This word, they are very present, and if they're having a good time. Our choirs have taken part in a regional festival, and you know, they were the most exciting choir. This was an adult choir in the whole afternoon. But that was my opinion anyway. And they were just so exciting to hear and to watch. If you're going to lead these types of groups, you will have to be open to new ideas and ways of thinking, which can be challenging, but they are rewarding, and you'll have to be flexible. It's not a straight line. You may need to go forwards, you may need to go backwards or sideways. One of the things we have noticed, and I'm on Adam's course at the moment, we talked about the fact that many, especially young people and adults with autism, have perfect pitch. Not everybody knows that. This isn't always a bonus. It can be quite a hindrance. I have a young man who loves to read music. He has perfect pitch. We recently sang with him in an event. Our main singer wanted everything transposing down, and he actually couldn't cope with it being transposed down. It made him sing out of tune. He was really upset by it. So you need to be in the right key for people with perfect pitch sometimes. So you've got to think about, why are the people coming to your choir? What they want to get from it? And what do you want from their inclusion? Are you prepared to compromise your choir's sound for them to have a great experience, a musical experience? And I just thought here, I just think about the types of choirs that are around, just sort of trying to paint a picture of, I'm thinking choirs now for singing. I know singing isn't just in choirs, but there's the community choir, there's the auditioned choir, and then you could have an exclusive send choir. And in all of these, which ones would be the best fit for the people you're working with? Might be all of them. Some of the young people we work with have amazing voices. They could be in an auditioned choir. It might be the community choir that's the best fit. We have exclusive choirs for children who come from the local special schools, and it's a very relaxed atmosphere and everybody feels comfortable, and that's maybe what you need. So you're going to have a wide range of people coming, or if you're just teaching them singing, they may have no voice to start with. You may have to help them find their voice. Are they actually using a talking voice? We find with some of the teenage boys, they keep their childhood voice when they're singing. It's really hard for them to work out how to use their newly found lower voice. So your job might be to help them widen their range and help them to sing with other people in a choir. And diction, words, just be too difficult. It's not something to worry about, but if you can work on it, then that's really good. The aim is to make sure everyone feels that they're happy there and participating and enjoying it. And the repertoire, I think your repetition is really good because it helps everybody feel secure. Not too many words sometimes, again, depending on the nature of the individuals. You might not need to sing all the verses. Some songs have very complicated lyrics, but you can just sing verse 1 and the chorus, and sing verse 1 again and the chorus, and maybe verse 1 again. You might need to do some fun exercises to help them develop their sense of pitch and rhythm, and talk about the structure. Age appropriate can be a difficult one. You might find that some of teenage young people are still wanting to sing the things they sang when they were young children. But also I found they also have a massive knowledge of YouTube and have loads of songs that they want to be involved with. So you need to find out what they know about. Accompanist or a recorded backing, if you can have a good accompanist, you can't really beat it. But if you haven't, there's nothing wrong with the backing track. But an accompanist who can follow the stops and starts is helpful. But I found your children can just get used to the backing track and work really well with it. Ways of teaching, my turn, your turn, pitch pattern from the leader, using tonic solfa in simple forms might be helpful, using multisensory activities to help people remember the words or to feel they're part of the experience if they can't sing, showing the pitch on the body or the shape of the melody, and big phrasing, where to breathe, making your arms move so you know what's happening in the music. I'm just going to be giving some lists now, which I'm going to go through very quickly. All of these headings have massive bits of information that go with them. So I'm just going to read them off as a list and can talk about them another time, perhaps, or look them up online. If you're trying to help young people with learning difficulties or with autism, pictures are really, really helpful. There's a whole system called PETS. Widget software, you can add pictures into your lyrics so they can see a picture version of what the words mean. Coloured filters and background paper for helping young people with dyslexia can be very helpful. Kinesthetic visual, British Sign Language, sign supported English, Makaton and sign along, all different ways of adding signing into helping with the words and with the singing. Each of those is quite different. I think I'm just giving you a list of things to think about here. The support staff are the key, really, to knowing which of these is going to work for the children you're working with. They will know the young people. They will know what they understand. This is just going briefly over different groups of young people that you might meet, those who are deaf or hearing impaired. They will probably have a British Sign Language signer, and they may sign the songs and not sing. They may sign in time. There's some marvelous signing videos on Sing Up you can use. And you need to plan with the person. You can't just turn up. You need to think, how are they going to do it? BSL is a different word order from English. So it might be sign along, which follows how English is structured. Visually impaired and blind participants. Obviously, Adam is the expert in this area. I've just got a few things here we've said is that you need to be consistent if you're going to get dynamics and tempo changes. You need to decide what you're doing and not change it so they know what's happening next. You can't rely on sort of changing it as a conductor might on the day. Indicate when to stop and start with appropriate etiquette. What that's really meaning, are you going to tap them on the shoulder, or are you going to use a musical cue that means we're coming to the end now? No last minute changes because they need to know what's going to happen next. Physical disabilities, it might be where are they going to sit? If they've got a very large wheelchair, it's going to be awkward in a row. Where are you going to put them? They might have a carer sat next to them. Where are they going to sit? And you're going to make sure your warm-ups are not about standing up and sitting down, and they actually fit in with things they can do and won't feel excluded. Children with autism and social situations such as a choir, they may not understand that they're meant to be all staying in the same place and start. I do know someone who goes around and shakes hands with everyone. This is fine. Why is it a problem? It's a very nice thing to do, really. They may need to learn how to control their emotions in this situation and modulating the volume of their voice. We have got some young people in our teenage choir who just want to sing as loud as they can, and really, it's amazing. It's fantastic. And actually, the more they come, the more they learn that they want to be able to hear their friends, and they start to sing so they can hear their friends and don't just shout over everybody. They may be unaware of the effect on the people around them. They may misinterpret hidden social rules. I think we don't realize how many things we take for granted that we just do, hidden social rules. I think that's something to really think about. What do you do that you don't realize you do? You need someone else perhaps to talk about that and enable these young people to know what's happening next. These are just helpful hints. They're just common sense, really. I'm sure you all do them, have spare folders. For those that are reading music, the young people in our choirs don't read. We have copies for the staff who can't remember the songs. The children remember them. Highlight sections, have recordings of the songs for them to practice. And they could record in the rehearsal so they can go back and practice what they've heard. Clear, consistent language, not too many words. I say that to myself. And clear instructions of how to practice, of what to practice in the gaps in between when you're not with them. Be patient with them and yourself. Work together to find the most effective way of learning, which may not be the same for every song and may change. We've changed over the years how we run these choirs. Where's the student's position in rehearsals, in concerts? Do they need more room to move? Do they need to be opposite you? Can they be photographed? Have an assessment conversation continuously with people. These choirs that we've worked with since 1984, we've been putting on concerts at Leeds Town Hall. We started off with 2 big mainstream adult choirs and our special needs choir, and now there's no mainstream choirs. We've had 150 children on the stage and an adult choir of 60, and the concert is now about them. It's not about them needing other people to fill the concert. It's just a fantastic experience for them. And we have a professional brass band, which makes it sound good. They feel good about themselves. These are just obvious things. Accessible venue, changing facilities. The number of times I've taken photographs of toilets when we're going to go to a new venue. Is it easy to get off the bus without crossing a road? Is it easy parking? Is there somewhere for someone to go if it's all too much? Who's staffing it, volunteers, and who's financing it? They're just basic questions. First aider and fire officer. Now, is there a point to this? Yes, it's a marvelous experience. They feel empowered because they've been singing, especially if it's a venue like Leeds Town Hall. They go back feeling really great about themselves and making progress. They've learned how to communicate, being part of a team, how to behave in a social event, and great self-confidence. So my last line, this is our little tagline, be included. It's not about making people feel special. It's about making them feel ordinary. That's the end of my presentation. Now I've got to find the stop share. Okay.
Thank you very much, Diane. I really enjoyed the bit, especially when you're talking about how working together to find the most effective way
Oh.
forward, I think is the really important key there. I wonder, Adam, would you like to enable your camera?
Yep.
Because I think one of the, and Diane as well, please don't go away. One of the main barriers, I think we could probably all agree, is actually ourselves as educators. And if I am an educator right at the beginning of this, I would feel, again, Adam, you brushed on this at the very beginning, that anxiety and desperation of getting it right and the absolute fear of getting it wrong. So have you got any words of wisdom on maybe first 2 or 3 steps that educators can make in creating an environment for everyone to sing or to find their voice?
Yeah, so shall we go then? You can, Dan. I think the people always say, just ask. In other words, if someone says, I'm coming along, I've got a profound hearing loss, for example, and the choir leader may think, gosh, how's that going to work? Just ask. And if the person themselves, perhaps they have severe learning difficulties, can't provide the answer, then their parents or assistants or support worker or carer will be able to. So I think it's not being afraid to ask the question and not being embarrassed to ask what sometimes people are afraid to ask in case it's a silly thing to ask, but it's not. And people who are, for whatever reason, differently abled, they won't mind. They'd much rather that than, you know, an embarrassing situation occurring down the line. So to take a very simple example, if a blind child wants to join your choir, then sometimes people get in a terrible tangle about, can I use words to do with vision, for example, or should I choose a song that doesn't have sight in it? And I mean, the simple answer is it's not a problem at all. And we say it's nice to see you to a blind person. But these very simple questions that people might be embarrassed to ask, just ask them, because people will be then comfortable. And if something you know, isn't clear, again, just don't be afraid to just be open about it and ask. That would be my advice anyway.
I'm not sure I can add much to that. The first thing I wrote down when you asked the question was be accepting in all situations, because they're all going to be different. Like I said, expect the unexpected, but you know, go with the flow. I think if you're somebody who has rigid expectations, you're going to need to bend those. I think that's all I could say, really.
And I find it's really difficult, especially for music educationists, is that we've always got in our head, or when we're brought up through our own music education, there's always an outcome, there's always a performance or something that, and we've got it in our head of what we want it to sound like. And actually, this is not that, is it? We're out almost turning it completely on its head. We're flipping it in, let's explore what we can achieve and what we've got, what you can bring. I especially like it, Adam, when you said you made that point that we are composers before we are performers. And it's that exploration of what we can do and what each person can bring to something that then might possibly lead to an outcome. But really, is it that exploring thing that we need to really nurture, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's about process and product, isn't it? I think for some young people, process is the thing, is the end in itself. I mean, I do a lot of work with autistic young people, and quite a lot of them actually do want to perform, and they really want to get it right. And so product for them is incredibly important. I think it's, just to go back to your previous point, I think, you know, labels are both a curse, aren't they, and a help. They can be helpful in terms of getting funding, as you know, with your EHCP experience. But they can be a curse because people think label autism, that must mean antisocial or must mean robotic, you know, these silly stereotypes that grow up. And the one thing that I've learned, I suppose, in the last 20 years, particularly in working with people on the spectrum, is that there's more diversity within neurodiversity than there is within typicality, if you like. So, there's a silly saying that every autistic person is an autistic, once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, but the thing is not to come with preconceptions. That's such an important thing. You said it, Diane, could go with the flow. And above all, if a young person comes to a group, they may well have an idea of what they want to do. So I think it's really nice to explore their aspirations and their hopes as a preliminary step as well, because a child may have a particular song they really, really want to sing, and I think it's good to go with that. You're putting on concerts, I usually say to the children, well, what repertoire interest? I didn't say what repertoire interests you. I say, what would you like to do? What would you like to sing? And actually building a program around their particular interests and their particular strengths is a much better way than saying, as some choirs do, here's what we're going to sing this season, like it or lump it. I don't think that's going to go very far.
I think you're right there.
I was going to say, I think don't be afraid, because we do put on concerts which are designed for our choirs to perform in, and we've had schools almost not come right to the last minute, and then they've come, and then when they've come, they said, when's the next one? Because they're so frightened of these children being put in front of others, and then they discover it's just the most magical experience. And yes, well, we'd like to do it again. Everything else like transport, well, let's not go into all those difficulties, but it's just, they can be so exciting, these concerts that you can put on for these young people to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one moment that I had in November. So I was conducting the Britain Peers Friday afternoons project for their primary school, but there was also 2 secondary schools involved, and one of them was a special secondary. And a composer called Charlotte Harding went into this secondary school, and they composed this piece of music together. It's called Me. And it just allowed, had all of these affirmations that everyone could say, and we invited them up to the stage. They were only school that were allowed to come onto the stage. And there was this one particular boy who just absolutely shone. And the whole choir that they brought from that school, like you said, Diane, just brought this incredible energy and magic to the entire performance. It was one of those moments I'm always going to remember, I think.
Yes, it's going to be very memorable. The amazing events, yeah.
Jenny, just picking up, there's a couple of questions in the chat I could pick up. So one is about, do you need any special training to use the Sounds of Intent assessment tool? There's 2 answers to that. One is, if you go onto the Sounds of Intent website, there is an online training course you can do free. It's interactive. It takes about 7 or 8 hours, but you can do it in your own time, and you can get a certificate at the end of it that you can print out. The other thing is to do the postgraduate certificate course that we offer at the University of Roehampton. So if you go onto the University of Roehampton website and click on and search for, actually, to be honest, it's easier to Google Sounds of Intent, University of Roehampton, then it'll take you straight to the page. Like lots of websites, once you're in the website, it's almost impossible to find your way around. But just do that and you'll find the link to the course that Diane's currently on. There's a comment about perfect pitch. How do the participants know which key the song should be in? Like you, Diane, about, I should say, 90% of the children I teach have perfect pitch, at least. And right from the word go, we play and sing every piece in every key, just gets around the problem. And actually,
I must remember that.
Having otherwise, you just end up with tantrums on the day. And the funny thing is, people think if you have perfect pitch, you can't transpose. That's absolutely the wrong thing. You can, and actually, it's easier to transpose. And the problem is not a musical one. The problem is, if I've only ever heard this piece in E flat major, then that's the key. But people with perfect pitch love to transpose because they get a richer experience, actually, in my experience, and are better at it. They're much better at it than I am, I must say. Oh, and thanks. There's a link to the PG set. Lots of
work on
links
that
to the
one.
chat. Do look at the chat, because ISM is flogging things that are
Yeah, yeah, we've got
uncharacteristic.
all of the links in that chat bit there. One of the other questions that I wanted to explore with you is, so if you have got a session and you have a young person join that session, one of the things I picked up from the Music Mark webinar that was very specifically on how to include children and young people in instrumental music making. But one of the points that they made was about having a predictable structure to your rehearsals or to your sessions. Diane, is that something that you have? Do you use a familiar structure?
Yes, but it's quite a loose, familiar structure. You know, basically we do some warm-ups and then we sing some songs, which is what you would do in any choir, really. I don't think it's, and with a break in the middle, I don't think it's any more complex than that, really. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm just I'm thinking especially of one of my sons, in that he absolutely loves to sing the songs that he knows, but a new song comes along and it definitely stills a certain sense of anxiety, because one, it's massive, it's daunting, he doesn't know how he's going to learn this song. And one of the things that his music teacher I noticed says, we're going to sing one of these songs and you can choose which of these songs you want to choose that you want to sing, but we are going to learn the part of a new song. We're not going to learn the whole song, we're going to learn part of the new song. And that absolutely transformed that session then.
Yes.
So that's why that resonated with me when I heard about it used in musical instrument sessions, that I'd never really thought about the introduction of a whole new song being.
It's hard work getting in new songs. And you know, you think, gosh, that didn't really seem very good. And then you come back and they've had a go at it when they go back to school. And suddenly you think, oh, it's starting to work now. Now, I would say the beginning of every new term, when we introduce new songs, is difficult, but they know that we'll just keep coming back to the same songs. We don't have huge number, you know, we just go over and over them with, yes. I suppose the structure is the same every week, really. Yeah.
And what about you, Adam? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, the success of inclusion is all about preparation, to be honest. So if it's a question of a deaf person, the interpreter may well want to know the repertoire or the songs in advance, because they'll need to do preparation. Because as you said, Diane, the order of English and the order of BSL can be different, and people don't understand. I think they just think the person signing is signing the words as they come, which they're not at all. So sometimes adjectives and nouns get transferred, for example. And so that needs thinking about. And it's best really to talk again about thinking of what the music you're going to perform or practice or have fun with, thinking in advance of what might work well for particular groups. For blind people, they may want the music in Braille, for example, and that can take a couple of months to get into a suitable format. For people who don't use notation, they may need time to memorize the parts, and they may, if they do have sort of cognitive differences, they may take longer to learn than other people. So if there's one thing about making inclusion work, it's about preparation. It's no use thinking of things the night before and then the blind child turns up and there's not a score for them, and the deaf child turns up and the interpreter can't make sense of it, and then you end up with embarrassment. So please, please, please plan well ahead. And by well ahead, it's not like a week, it's at least a couple of months to enable. And then also the autistic children themselves can, as you said, Jenny, they have time then to absorb this new thing, and maybe they can take it to their teacher so that they can approach the group session with confidence, knowing that they already know their part. I can't stress enough that is the biggest single factor to success. And
that's all about providing a safe environment, isn't it? That's all part of creating that safe environment. Is there any other suggestions that you can think of that would help support creating this environment for someone, maybe a child that has never really found their voice yet, and maybe could be quite anxious about their vocalizing. Any tips?
Personally, I would, if it's possible, to see them first. If it's possible, it makes such a difference. So they know you as the leader, and you can just go through stuff with them. And then they'll, if they're confident with you, then that really helps break the ice. Or maybe it's possible to pair up, buddy up, you know, a new person with a more experienced person. I think it's about having, it's almost like a lily pad, you know, you don't jump, you put one foot first and see if you can take your weight. And I think having that bridge between not knowing anyone and knowing something or someone makes a huge difference, particularly for people on the autism already, I think. So they've already got a mate, they've already got, you know, a familiar thing that they can use then as a bridge.
Our groups, they tend to come in school classes, so they're with their friends. We have had some really interesting experiences with our choir when they did a little concert. One of the young boys, he was so interested in looking at the audience, he didn't sing a note. But when he got home at 2 a.m, he sang the whole repertoire to his parents. That's one of my favourite stories. So sometimes not singing could be about just being interested in everything else that's going on in the room and actually taking it in, but not having time to sing because there's too much, it's too exciting. That's
a really good point, Diane. And also, you know, at schools, very often they rehearse in classrooms and then they go somewhere else for the concert. Mm-hmm. That's a recipe for disaster because, as you say, the children, all children will start looking around anyway. And if you're particularly got sensory needs or sensory interests, then the light streaming through a window may totally absorb you. So again, if it's possible, have at least one rehearsal where you're going to be. And if you're wearing some kind of costume or dress, again, so often, you know, child plays the piano fine, and then mum or dad decides to put them in a nice new jacket, and then the child spends the whole time itching because it doesn't, they're not used to it. So it's also really important that the whatever they're going to wear, if it's different, they have experience of as well, so that they're not sensorily bombarded too much. Someone's a really interesting question about listening as the primary source of learning. Absolutely. So a third of the sound of intent framework is about listening. I can't stress enough. And there's such a pressure that I think parents and teachers feel that the child has to produce something straight away. And lots of autistic children I work with, they just want to sit at the edge of the group and just, even if it might be a year, they just want to come to the rehearsals, and that's absolutely fine. You don't actually learn by singing yourself, you learn by listening to other people. And I think because of the pressure to tick boxes, you know, within schools, has the child done this, has the child done that? And it's harder to tick a listening box, but my goodness me, it's the most important stage.
Yeah. Oh, I do get the sense, Diane and Adam, that really we're only just scratching the surface of all of this, aren't we? And that we could probably do another 3 webinars on this. We are coming to the close almost. I do want to just quickly mention a previous ISM Trust webinar, reaching and engaging deaf people in music making activities. And there is a section there that, let me find it. Danny Lane was talking about vocalize. So I highly recommend everyone to go and watch that and explore how they created this vocalize project. And just seeing all the other things that I've got to say, there are some other questions that were which were set, but actually I think we have pretty much answered all of those. If not, we will we'll create some form of communication afterwards, and maybe if anyone has come up with any more questions for Diane, Adam, and maybe even myself, then we can answer those at a later date in a different format. So finding the bit that I need. Thank you very much, Adam and Diane, for that really, really helpful session. I myself have learned quite a lot. And thank you to all of you for joining us. And I hope you have found this session informative and useful. If you have any further questions, please do email us on enquiries@ismtrust.org. please do fill in our post-webinar survey. You will find it in the chat and it will also be emailed out to you. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our services and offer more free professional development. The webinar recording will be sent to you by email and available to watch on our website. We will also send you some useful links that we have shared during this webinar. Our next event is our Breaking the Singing Barrier series on cultural barriers to singing, and that's on the 23rd of April, followed by differing barriers between primary and secondary singing on the 2nd of May, and finally, psychological and personal barriers to singing on the 15th of May. Finally, may I thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you at another ISM Trust event soon. So thank you very much and goodbye.